Okay, so after we do our first reading, we always jump into annotations, right? And so for the Lamb to the Slaughter, we're looking at Mary Maloney, who is a wife, and her husband, Patrick, who she ends up killing, right? So now we want to look and see. We're really going to focus on the plot, the setting, and we're going to look for foreshadowing. Okay, so let's start. The room was warm and clean, the curtains drawn, the two lamps alight, hers and the one by the empty chair opposite. On the sideboard behind her, two tall glasses, soda water, whiskey, fresh ice cubes, and a thermos bucket. So this setting here is very perfect. It's kind of like a perfect setup, right? And there's so we're going to highlight that, and then we're going to add our comment. So it's perfect. But I'm putting quotations because it's like the ideal, right? Perfect setup. It's inviting and calm, right? So those are all the things that we know. It's also kind of a juxtaposition, and a juxtaposition is basically just like an opposite. So it's when, think of like sometimes when they have really sad scenes happening, like in a film clip, but then really exciting music. That's a juxtaposition because those two feelings don't match. Or like a really happy thing being played with super sad music. That's a juxtaposition. So this is a juxtaposition as well because we know that there's going to be a murder that takes place, but we don't get a hint of that at all, right? So Mary Maloney, and we just want to highlight this because she's our protagonist. Was waiting for her husband to come home from work. Now and again, she would glance up, but without anxiety, merely to please herself with the thought that each minute gone by made it nearer the time he would come home. So I want, again, she's feeling pretty calm right now. So we want to note that. Merely to please herself with the thought that each minute gone by made it near the time when he would come. There was a slow, smiling air about her, and everything she did, the drop of a head as she bent over, her sewing was... There was a slow, smiling air about her, and about everything she did. The drop of a head as she bent over, her sewing was curiously tranquil. Her skin, for this was her sixth month with a child, had acquired a wonderful translucent quality. The mouth was soft, and the eyes, with their new placid look, seemed larger, darker than before. When the clock said 10 minutes to 5, she began to listen, and a few moments later, punctually as always, she heard the tires on the gravel outside. So she's just... Here we look, there's like an innocence with her. Right? They're painting the picture of innocence. Oops, not a link. Oh my goodness. Right. When the clock said 10 minutes to 5, she began to listen, and a few moments later, she, punctually as always, she heard the tires on the gravel outside and the car door slamming, the footsteps passing the window, the key turning in the lock. She laid aside her sewing, stood up, and went forward to kiss him as she came in. So there's love there, right? "Hello, darling," she said. "Hello, darling." She took his coat and hung it in the closet. Then she walked over and made the drinks, a strongest one for him, a weak one for herself. And soon she was back again in her chair with the sewing, and he in the other, opposite, holding the tall glass with both hands, rocking it so the ice cubes tinkled against the side. For her this was a blissful time of day. She knew he didn't want to speak much until the first drink was finished, and she, on the other hand, was content to sit quietly, enjoying his company after the long hours in the house, right? So it's just calm. This whole paragraph just really looked, is really just building up that, like, the idea of innocence. There's nothing amiss here. She's somebody who loves her husband. She doesn't sound like somebody who's going to kill her husband, right? Tired, darling? Yes, he said, I'm tired. And as he spoke, he did an unusual thing. So this is the first glimpse that we get something is amiss. That something is off. Foreshadowing, right? He lifted his glass and drained it in one swallow, although there was still half of it, at least half of it left. She wasn't really watching him, but she knew what he had done because she heard the ice cubes falling back against the bottom of the empty glass. When he lowered his arm, he paused a moment, leaning forward in the chair. Then he got up and went slowly over to fetch it himself. And then this whole paragraph here is really just her. We're still kind of in the exposition. So we haven't yet gotten to the rising action. We aren't really sure what the conflict is yet. We know something's happening, we're just not sure what. So, when he came back, she noticed the drink was dark amber with a quantity of whiskey in it. Darling, shall I get your slippers? No. She watched him as he began to sip the dark yellow drink and could see little oily swirls in the liquid because it's so strong. I think it's a shame, she said, that when a policeman gets to be senior as you, they keep him walking about on his feet all day long. So still, this whole thing is just off. This is kind of what we're getting. This also here, um, dark amber with whiskey. We have foreshadowing here. She watched him, and she's just used to. We want to really also make sense that normally she's used to getting him food. She's getting, starting supper, making sure that after work he can just relax, and he's refusing that. So that's another part of foreshadowing that we want to focus on. Like her hospitality, really. If you're too tired to eat, she went on. So she's still kind of just going on and saying, please let me get you something. And he's saying no, he doesn't want it. This is the first time here, too, we get some information from her that she's feeling a little bit off. She's noticing. This is like the first time we get something where she's not super happy and excited. Something is off. We'll just say that. Sit down. Just for a minute, sit down. It wasn't until then that she began to get frightened. This is foreshadowing again. She feels unease. Go on, she said, sit down. She lowered herself back slowly into the chair, watching him all the time with those large, bewildered eyes. He had finished his second drink and was staring down the glass, frowning. Listen, he said, I've got something to tell you. What is it, darling? What's the matter? He had now become absolutely motionless, and he kept his head down so that the light from the lamp beside him fell across the upper part of his face, leaving the chin and mouth in shadow. She noticed there was a little muscle moving near the corner of his left eye. This is going to be a bit of a shock to you, I'm afraid, but I've thought about it a good deal, and I've decided the only thing to tell you right away. I hope you won't blame me too much. So I want you to, in this paragraph here on your own document, I want you to think about what foreshadowing do we see here. Okay? What are you getting? Where is it starting to be like, something's off, right? We want to look and see what's happening. And he told her. It didn't take long, 4 or 5 minutes at most, and she sat very still through it all, watching him with a kind of dazed horror as she went further and further away with each word. Dazed horror. Here's an example of foreshadowing. And then also here, she went as he went further and further away from her. This is foreshadowing as well. And she is starting to become detached, which is important, right? When we know what she's going to do. So there it is, he added, and I know it's kind of a bad time to be telling you. Remember, she's pregnant, but there simply wasn't any other way. Of course, I'll give you money and see you're looked after, but there needn't really be any fuss. I hope not, anyway. It wouldn't be very good for my job. Her first instinct was not to believe any of it, to reject it all. It occurred to her that perhaps he hadn't even spoken, that she herself had imagined the whole thing. Maybe if she went about her business and acted as though she hadn't been listening, then later, when she sort of woke up again, she might find none of it ever happened. So I also want you to think about what is, and I want you to answer on your own paper, what did her husband do? Or what did Mr. Maloney do? Divorce. Did he cheat on her? I'll get this supper, she managed to whisper, and this time he didn't stop her. When she walked across the room, she couldn't feel her feet touching the floor. She couldn't feel anything at all, except a slight nausea and a desire to vomit. Everything was automatic now. So this whole thing is, again, that foreshadowing and detachment. Right? She's really detached. And then here again, this is interesting. We need to mark this. Of course, we know why. And that's all for today. And we'll finish the rest tomorrow.